Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a close look at, well, one of the most fundamental chapters in all of chemistry, hydrocarbons,
That's right. These are the molecules that are quite literally everywhere.
containing just carbon and hydrogen. They power our world. We're talking about the fuel in your car, the gas that heats your home, even the plastic bottle you might be holding.
And our mission today is to really give you a clear path through this topic. We're breaking down the structures, the key reactions, those detailed mechanisms.
Things like free radical substitution and electrophilic addition.
Exactly. And we'll also hit the critical environmental side of it all. We're going to cover the two main families, alkanes and alkanes in order, so you'll walk away with a really solid understanding.
Okay, let's dive in. So hydrocarbons, they're mostly derived from crude oil. And we start by splitting them into two groups based on this idea of saturation.
And that chemical fingerprint really defines everything about how they behave. Alkanes are the saturated hydrocarbons.
Think of them as full, completely maxed out molecules.
Right. Their general formula is CnH2n plus 2. So
Yeah.
for pentane, you'd have C5H12. Every carbon atom is bonded to 4 other atoms, all with strong single covalent bonds.
And that's that sp3 hybridization, giving it the classic tetrahedral shape with bond angles of about 109.5 degrees. So if these are the basic building blocks, why are they so, well, unreactive? What makes them so stable?
It really boils down to two things. First, those carbon and carbon-hydrogen single bonds, those sigma bonds, are incredibly strong.
Okay.
But maybe more importantly, the molecules are nonpolar. The electronegativity difference between carbon and hydrogen is tiny. So you just don't get any significant partial charges.
Ah, so that's the key. No partial positive charge to attract a nucleophile, and no electron-rich areas to attract an electrophile. They sort of ignore most other chemicals.
Precisely. It's why they don't mix with polar things like water.
Hmm.
But while they are pretty inert, they do undergo two huge world-changing reactions.
And those are combustion and substitution. Let's start with combustion then. It's critical, since alkanes are our primary fuels for transport, for industry, everything.
Right. And ideally, we always want complete combustion. That means you have plenty of oxygen.
And when that happens,
The carbon gets fully oxidized to carbon dioxide, CO2, and the hydrogen becomes water. If you take octane from gasoline, the balanced equation would be something like 2C8H18 plus 25O2 gives you 16CO2 and 18H2O.
but the real world isn't always ideal. What happens inside a car engine where the oxygen supply is limited?
Then you get incomplete combustion, and instead of CO2, you start producing the really toxic, odorless gas carbon monoxide, CO.
And that's not the only problem, is it?
Not at all. The high temperatures in the engine also oxidize the nitrogen that's just naturally in the air. This creates nitrogen oxides, or NECX.
Which cause acid rain and that photochemical smog you see over cities.
And on top of that, you get unburnt hydrocarbons, called VOCs, some of which are known carcinogens. So it's a nasty cocktail of pollutants.
So what's the chemical fix for this? How do we clean up the exhaust?
That's the job of the catalytic converter. It's basically a mini chemical plant bolted onto your exhaust pipe.
And it does a few things at once.
It does. It uses catalysts like platinum and rhodium to, first, oxidize the toxic CO into less toxic CO2. It also oxidizes any of those unburnt hydrocarbons.
Okay.
And crucially, it reduces the nitrogen oxides back into farmless nitrogen gas, N2, which already makes up most of the air we breathe.
But wait a minute, if it's turning CO into CO2, then the catalytic converter is actually producing more carbon dioxide, the main greenhouse gas.
And that is the fundamental trade-off of our current technology.
Yeah.
We're literally choosing to reduce immediate acute poisons like CO and OX in exchange for increasing the long-term climate risk from CO2.
A difficult compromise. Okay, let's move to the other major reaction for alkenes, substitution. They'll react with halogens, but you have to force them, right?
You do. It only happens in the presence of UV light, like sunlight.
Yeah.
And the mechanism is just fascinating. It's a chain reaction.
The free radical substitution mechanism, how does that chain get started?
It all begins with initiation. The UV light provides just enough energy to split the halogen bond, say a Cl-Cl bond, through something called homolytic fission.
Homolytic, meaning it splits evenly.
Exactly. Each chlorine atom takes one electron from the bond, forming two highly reactive free radicals. We show that with a little dot, Cl dot.
So once you have that unstable radical, the chain reaction proper begins. Propagation.
Correct. The chlorine radical is desperate to become stable, so it attacks an alkane molecule and rips a hydrogen atom off it. That forms HCl, and in the process creates a new alkyl free radical.
And now that new radical is the reactive species.
Right. It immediately finds another chlorine molecule, a Cl2, grabs one of the atoms to form our product, chloroalkane. And this is the key part, it regenerates the original chlorine radical.
Which can then go and attack another alkane molecule, and the cycle continues.
It just keeps going and going until termination. That's the final step where any two free radicals happen to bump into each other and combine to form a stable molecule.
So why isn't this used more in industry to make specific compounds?
Well, because it's a total mess. That chlorine radical is so reactive, it doesn't care what it attacks. It can attack the original alkane, or it can attack a molecule that's already been substituted.
So you end up with a mixture of trichloroalkanes, everything.
Exactly. It's just not a clean way to produce a pure substance.
Okay, so alkanes are the stable family members that only react under pressure. Let's shift gears now to the rebels of the family, the alkanes.
The alkenes are the unsaturated hydrocarbons. Their general formula is CnH2, and their defining feature is the carbon-carbon double bond.
And that double bond is made of two parts, right?
One strong sigma bond, just like in alkanes, but also one much weaker pi bond.
And that weak pi bond is the key. That's the vulnerability that makes alkanes so much more reactive. But where do we get them from in the first place?
We mostly make them through a process called cracking. We take those large, heavy, not so useful alkene molecules from crude oil and essentially smash them into smaller pieces. By heating them to very high temperatures over a catalyst like aluminum oxide, but in the absence of oxygen so they don't just burn. This breaks them into smaller, more valuable alkanes, and crucially, these highly useful alkenes.
And these alkenes are the feedstock for the entire chemical industry.
Pretty much, yeah. And because of that reactive pi bond, their signature reaction is addition. The double bond breaks, and two new single bonds form.
Let's run through the main types. First up, hydrogenation.
Right, adding hydrogen gas with a nickel or platinum catalyst. This turns the alkene back into an alkane. It's used commercially to turn liquid vegetable oils into solid margarine.
Okay, and then halogenation.
This is the classic chemical test for unsaturation. If you add orange-brown bromine water to an alkene, the color disappears almost instantly as the bromine adds across the double bond.
A very clear visual test. And what about adding steam?
The addition of steam is a huge industrial process. You react an alkene like ethene with steam at high temperature and pressure with a phosphoric acid catalyst to produce alcohols. In this case, ethanol.
Now, things get a bit more complex when you add something like hydrogen bromide, HBr, to an alkene that isn't symmetrical, like propene.
Yes, this is where you get into the major and minor product rule.
So, what's the rule? How do you predict which product will form the most?
The major product is the one where the halogen, the bromine in this case, bonds to the carbon atom of the double bond that is already bonded to the most other carbon atoms, or alkyl groups.
And the why behind that rule is explained by the electrophilic addition mechanism. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. The pi bond is an area of high electron density, so it's attractive to electrophile species that accept an electron pair.
It attacks the electrophile.
Right. The pi bond breaks, and a bond forms between one of the carbons and the electrophile. This leaves the other carbon with a positive charge. We call this a carbocation intermediate.
And this is where the stability comes in.
This is everything. Alkyl groups have an electron donating effect, what we call the inductive effect. They push electron density towards that positive charge.
Sort of helping to stabilize it, to spread out the burden of that charge.
An excellent way to put it. So a secondary carbocation, which is attached to two alkyl groups, is much more stable than a primary one, which is only attached to one.
And since nature favors stability, the reaction pathway that goes through the more stable secondary carbocation is the one that happens most often.
And that leads directly to the major product. It's all about forming the most stable possible intermediate.
That's a really clear way to understand it. Okay, moving on quickly. Alkanes also react with strong oxidizing agents like potassium manganate.
They do. And what happens depends entirely on the conditions. Under mild oxidation, so a cold, dilute solution, the purple solution turns colorless, and the alkene is converted into a diol.
A diol being a molecule with two OH groups.
Correct. But if you use harsh oxidation, a hot, concentrated solution, you don't just open the double bond. You completely break the molecule apart right at the C=C bond.
And this is actually really useful for figuring out the structure of an unknown alkene.
Incredibly useful. By analyzing the fragments, you can work backwards. If a carbon in the double bond was bonded to two hydrogens, it becomes CO2 gas.
Okay.
If it was bonded to one hydrogen in an alkyl group, it becomes a carboxylic acid. And if it was bonded to two alkyl groups, you get a ketone. It's a powerful analytical tool.
Which brings us to arguably the most important reaction of alkenes. Addition polymerization. This is how we make plastics.
It is. You take small, unsaturated molecules, the monomers, like ethene, and under the right conditions, they break their pi bonds and link together end to end to form a massive chain.
The polymer, like polyethylene. And the key thing here is that the polymer is the only product.
Yes, it's an addition reaction. Nothing is lost. And that leads us straight into the huge environmental problem with plastics.
Because these polyalkenes are basically just enormous synthetic alkenes.
They've inherited that incredible stability of the CC and CH single bonds. They're chemically inert.
Which means they're non-biodegradable. Nature just doesn't have an easy way to break them down, so they persist in landfills and oceans for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
And even when we try to dispose of them, say by burning them for energy, you still release huge amounts of CO2, contributing to global warming.
And it's even worse for some specific plastics, like PVC.
Much worse. Burning polychloroethene, PVC, releases highly acidic and toxic hydrogen chloride gas, plus other harmful compounds like dioxins. It requires very expensive high-temperature incinerators to manage safely.
Okay, to wrap up for anyone studying this, can you just quickly recap the rule for figuring out a polymer's structure from its monomer and vice versa?
It's a really simple translation. To go from the monomer to the polymer's repeat unit, you just change the carbon double bond to a single bond, and then draw new bonds extending outwards from those carbons.
And to go backwards.
From the repeat unit to the monomer, you just find that repeating section in the chain and turn the central carbon single bond back into a double bond.
A fantastic summary. So, if we boil it all down, alkenes are defined by their stability and undergo free radical substitution.
While alkenes are defined by the reactivity of their weak pi bond, and their key reaction is electrophilic addition.
With the outcome being decided by the stability of that carbocation intermediate?
Right. And if you really want to remember the core idea, just think that the difference between the gasoline that vanishes from your car's tank and the plastic bag that lasts for centuries is, in essence, just one single weak pi bond. That's the difference between a fleeting fuel and a forever chemical.
That was a truly thorough exploration of the hydrocarbon family. We hope this deep dive helps solidify your understanding of this critical chemistry chapter. Thank you for joining us.